for a brand new show. Scooby Doo is here again, away we go.
Scooby Doo is running from a spooky ghost.
Shaggy isn't doing what he does the most. Hey, come on, get involved till the mystery is solved.
Hang around for Scooby Doo.
Hey, come on, get involved till the mystery is solved.
Hang around for Scooby Doo. That's my pal. Scooby Dooby Doo.
Hello, Scooby Doo fans! Welcome to my Season 2 Episode 5 review of the Scooby Doo Show. So last time I kickstarted my 2025 summer special with a review of Season 2 Episode 4 of the Scooby Doo Show. I hope you guys enjoyed that. But of course today, I'll be covering Season 2 Episode 5 of the Scooby Doo Show, titled The Spooky Case of the Grand Prix Race, which was released on October 8th, 1977. The short synopsis of the episode is, the gang go to watch a Grand Prix race only to run afoul of a phantom race car driver that makes the other drivers and their cars disappear. Shaggy and Scooby go in disguise as race drivers to foil this mystery, which only leads to Shaggy's own kidnapping by the Phantom. Now the rest of the gang set about rescuing him while still trying to solve the mystery. So normally I would tell you guys what DVD I'm watching Season 2 of the Scooby Doo Show on. However, sadly, Season 2 of the Scooby Doo Show has yet to get any sort of physical media release. I wish it did. I wish it did have some sort of physical media release, or the Scooby Doo Show had a complete series box set. That would be even better. But unfortunately, that hasn't happened yet. So like I've done in previous Season 2 reviews and future ones, as well as this current one, I'll be watching Season 2 Episode 5 on HBO Max, which is my recommended, streaming service on where to watch the Season 2 of the Scooby Doo Show on. There's a lot of Scooby Doo content off of HBO Max currently, but Season 2 of the Scooby Doo Show is not a casualty of that, and the Scooby Doo Show, thankfully, is still up at the moment. There is other options, obviously, if that fails, but that's my recommended streaming service on where you can view this. Now, as far as this episode's reception is concerned, I think fans really like this episode, or at least consider it average. I don't hear too many discussions about this episode like any other Scooby Doo Show episode, because the Scooby Doo Show doesn't really get talked about that much. It's not one of those popular episodes. But I do think it does get positive discourse from Scooby Doo fans. It does get positive discussion around it. So if it's not, considered good, it's at least considered well-liked or average. But do I agree? Do I consider this episode a good or average episode? Or maybe I consider it a terrible episode and a bad episode? Well, let's find out, shall we? So let's take a look at the episode to see whether I think it is a good or bad episode of the Scooby Doo Show. The episode begins at the Grand Prix time trials as one of the racers, Carl Conover, speeds by. The Phantom Racer, a ghostly apparition driving a race car, appears and makes Carl and his race car disappear in the fog. Meanwhile, Mystery Inc. read about the Phantom Racer in the newspaper and decide to investigate. They head to the racetracks to talk to the sponsor of the race, Mr. Osborne. Mr. Osborne explains that the Phantom Racer is the ghost of a racer who drove off a cliff in the fog a few years ago, and he's seeking vengeance on all race car drivers. He also tells the gang that he can't cancel the race or else they'll be ruined. The gang assures Mr. Osborne that they will solve the mystery so the race can go on as planned. Suddenly, a bedraggled man, moaning with terror, stumbles in, and Mr. Osborne recognizes him as Carl, the missing driver, apparently having gotten away from the Phantom Racer somehow. But Carl doesn't remember a thing about what happened. The gang drives around and looks for clues. They find race car tire tracks and deduce they had to be from the Phantom Racer's race car. They follow the tracks until they disappear near an old junkyard. Inside the junkyard, they discover a jet plane with the engine machine, which is odd considering the junkyard is specifically for automobiles. They enter an old house where they meet the inhabitant, an eccentric old caretaker, who tells the gang that the Phantom has recently been haunting the antique car museum, and the gang decides to head there. We get a funny little scene of Scooby impersonating the Phantom Racer, and Scooby's just killing it with these fucking imitations because I laugh my ass off so many times when Scooby does this. It's not all the time, but man, this is like the second in a few episodes where Scooby's genuinely made me laugh just by impersonating the villain. Like, I don't know why it makes me laugh so hard, but Scooby's just fucking hilarious when he does this stuff. Upon their arrival, they find the door locked, so Shaggy and Scooby climb through a window and unlock the door. Inside, they split up to find the Phantom. Scooby and Shaggy encounter the Phantom and are chased. They end up trapped in an old automobile and pushed down a steep hill by the Phantom. They manage to escape safely and reunite with the gang. The Phantom appears and warns the gang that whoever enters the Grand Prix race will not escape his vengeance and makes a hasty exit in the race car. They rush back to the tracks to try and stop the next victim, Ken Rogers, who becomes the Phantom Racer's next victim that gets taken. The gang decide the only way they will catch the Phantom Racer is to get the Phantom Racer to chase them. They decide to put Scooby and Shaggy in a race car and have them go undercover as drivers, and they drive down the track to see if the Phantom Racer shows up. The decoy works, and the Phantom chases Shaggy and Scooby. The Phantom Racer manages to kidnap Shaggy, leaving the gang with nothing to go on. Scooby tells the rest of the gang that the Phantom Racer took Shaggy to the junkyard. They go to the junkyard and split up to look for Shaggy. Daphne and Fred enter the old house, and they find out that the old man is nowhere to be found either. Daphne inadvertently discovers a hidden cavern underneath the Watchman's house, as well as the rest of the junkyard, and Scooby, Velma, Fred, and Daphne all check it out. They split up to search for Shaggy. Daphne and Fred find the missing race cars, and it looks as if someone has tried to repaint the race cars. They also find a book about magic and a book on how to hypnotize. Velma and Scooby find the Phantom race car, as well as the Phantom Racer, who's trapping Shaggy behind a brick wall. Velma and Scooby concoct a plan to free Shaggy, but it backfires and the Phantom Racer chases them. Velma and Scooby escape and manage to run back and free Shaggy. I love this scene. I love seeing Scooby and Velma rescue Shaggy. You guys know I'm a sucker for whenever Shaggy or Scooby get kidnapped. When one of them gets kidnapped and the other saves them, I really enjoy that. It shows how strong their friendship and bond is. So I love seeing how Scooby, how strong Scooby's friendship is with Shaggy, and that he'll do everything he can to help his best buddy. And also, there's a couple of funny things, like Scooby dropping the brick on his foot, which is hilarious. And I do like that Velma helps out as well.
Velma! Scooby!
Yikes! Now you did it! We gotta go back for Shaggy, Scoob!
Boy, am I glad to see you!
We'll get you out, Shag.
Yeah!
The entire gang reunites and the Phantom Racer shows up and he chases the gang in his race car, with the gang riding two of the missing race cars. A chase ensues, ending with the capture of the Phantom Racer.
I wonder where the others are.
Help!
That sounds like Shag.
You found Shaggy.
And the Phantom. And we found enough clues to wrap up this mystery.
He's back.
Everybody into the race car, fast! He'll never catch us now.
What? Hang on, Scoob!
Faster, Shaggy, faster!
Hooray! We lost the Phantom. Yeah, but we've lost Shaggy and Scooby, too.
We better go back and look for them. They may need help. Shaggy, look! George, do something! Oh boy, like that was close. Uh-oh. Oh no! Yo! Quick, do something, Scoob!
There they go, with the Phantom right on their tail. Yippee! We treed the Phantom.
Yeah!
The Phantom Racer is revealed to be Ken Rogers, who faked his disappearance as part of his scheme to steal all the race cars, repaint them, and sell them overseas. He covered up his plan by using the legend of the Phantom Racer. The first clue was the jet plane in the junkyard. Ken Rogers put the jet's engine in his race car, which is why Ken Rogers' car sounded strange, and it was able to be faster than the other race cars. He also rigged his race car to pick up the other stolen race cars with magnets, and he would transport them to the underground cavern in the junkyard. He hypnotized the drivers to make them blank out and forget what happened. Ken Rogers faked his kidnapping by using a projected image of the Phantom Racer from a projector in the car, which doesn't really make sense because his tracks just randomly disappear, and so does he, and that doesn't really line up if the Phantom Racer was a projection. Because how could he make himself disappear and his car and his tire tracks while still having the Phantom Racer be projected somehow? It really doesn't make sense. It would have made a lot more sense had he been the Phantom Racer projecting himself, Ken Rogers, as a victim, but he ended up, just projecting his own image. That would have made more sense than Ken Rogers being the one, the false victim, and using the Phantom Racer as projection. To me, this is inconsistent, and it doesn't really make sense. I don't know how Ken Rogers made himself, his tire tracks, or his car disappear. It doesn't really make sense at all. It doesn't line up with what we saw earlier. And it would have made a lot more sense had he been dressed up in the Phantom Race car, Phantom Racer outfit, and projected an image of himself to fake his own kidnapping that way. That would have made a lot more sense. The creepy old watchman in the junkyard was really Ken Rogers in disguise trying to throw the gang off track. Later, the gang are at Mr. Osborne's Grand Prix as Fred has a chat with Mr. Osborne for a while, and Mr. Osborne starts the race. After the race begins, Shaggy spots a bone floating in midair, in which he calls it a phantom bone, while Scooby goes running after it, and he immediately takes a few bites and licks out of the bone, before the episode ends with Scooby-Doo saying his famous catchphrase. I'm going to give Season 2, Episode 5 of The Scooby Doo Show 3 stars out of 5. Yeah, this was a decent episode. It had a lot of flaws to it, don't get me wrong. And normally, with the amount of flaws that this episode had, I would normally consider it to be like a below-average episode. But this episode is kind of in the category of kind of like the Josie and the Pussycats episode, where it's such a fun and enjoyable but flawed episode. Like, if I'm in the right mindset, I could switch my brain off and have a fun time with this episode. And that's the main thing with this episode. Like, it does have a lot of flaws, don't get me wrong, but it's such a fun and enjoyable episode. It's such a good time. Had a really fun time with it. It was fun watching it again. And obviously it's not perfect. It has a lot of issues. But if I'm in the right mood, I'm willing to overlook those issues and just turn my brain off and have a good time. So, yeah, very much like the Josie and the Pussycats episode in the new Scooby Doo movies. This fits into the category of, yeah, it's middle of the road, but it's a fun and enjoyable but flawed middle of the road episode. So before I get into my negatives for the episode and what hurts this episode overall, I'll first get into my positives of the episode and what I actually did like about the episode. So starting with the positives, my first one is I think Fred was a good leader in this episode. He fulfilled his basic role of being a good leader, telling everyone where they needed to go, what to do next. And I felt he helped piece together the clues to help solve the mystery as well. He found, the 2 books, him and Daphne, of, magic tricks and how to hypnotize, which were vital clues on how the villain was doing his, accomplishing his scheme. So I felt like Fred fulfilled his basic role in this episode, and also kind of fulfilled Velma's basic role as well, where he not only was a leader, but he helped piece together the clues to help solve the mystery. Didn't really create a cool trap in this episode. The villain just kind of got, trapped based on dumb luck by Shaggy and Scooby. But he did create a cool little gimmick with the race car when Shaggy and Scooby were decoys. He rigged a parachute in the back of it. So that was cool of him. It didn't end up working as well as he had hoped, because that ended up getting Shaggy captured. But it still was a neat little gimmick. So I felt like overall, Fred fulfilled his basic role, and it did a lot in this episode to where I found him, passable and enjoyable. Then we have Shaggy and Scooby. Shaggy and Scooby fulfilled their basic roles of being their usual funny, cowardly selves. Shaggy and Scooby were a blast in this episode. I had a fun time with them. They were really funny, really hilarious. They were quite brave for being decoys for the Phantom Racer, which actually ended up being beneficial to them solving the mystery in the end. They also inadvertently helped capture the villain at the end, even though they didn't know it, based on their dumb luck, by them and the Phantom Racer hitting the side of a cliff that caused the rock to fall over, which in turn caused the Phantom Racer to be trapped up in the tree. But yeah, I found Shaggy and Scooby to be really fun and cowardly in this episode. They were a blast. They were really funny, had a lot of funny moments. And like I said, I love seeing Scooby save his best pal. Like I said in, previous series, whenever Shaggy and Scooby, whenever one of them are in danger and the other one has to go and help them, I'm always a sucker for those because I love seeing that. That's a great showcase of their friendship. How even when they're scared and they're in danger, like Scooby clearly doesn't want to face the Phantom Racer, but he has to. He knows he has to save his best pal. So that's what I really like about it. And he doesn't go at it alone. He has Velma for help as well. So it was nice seeing Scooby save his best pal and helping Shaggy out from being, when Shaggy was kidnapped and, getting that bravery up to save his best pal. I'm always a sucker for when Shaggy and Scooby save the rest of the gang, or the rest of the gang save Shaggy and Scooby, or when Shaggy and Scooby save each other. I'm always a sucker for that. I love when the gang help each other out when one of them's in danger, especially for Shaggy and Scooby with their bond and their friendship. When one of them's in danger, when Shaggy's in danger, I love seeing Scooby step up to the plate and realize my best pal is in danger. I gotta go save him. I may be scared of the Phantom Racer, but I gotta save him, and I like seeing that, so it was great. Next, we have the villain of the episode, who I thought was really good. So the main villain of the episode was, of course, the Phantom Racer. Now, the Phantom Racer isn't particularly scary. I don't find much, I don't really find anything about him, scary at all. But I will say that I do like his design, and I do find the Phantom Racer to be fun and entertaining. He's a joy to watch, and I really enjoy his presence and his maniacal laughing and all that. But I don't find him particularly scary. I don't think anything he does is particularly scary. His backstory implies that he could be scary. And because he wants to seek vengeance against the racers. But he doesn't really do much to threaten the gang's safety or the racer's safety. The creepiest thing is definitely when he hypnotizes Carl Conover. And Carl comes back as like this zombie-like figure where he's like in a trance and he's like moaning and groaning. Like, that's really creepy. But other than that, like, we don't really see much from the Phantom Racer that makes him particularly scary. But he's a fun and enjoyable villain and a joy to watch. And I do like his maniacal laugh. And, whenever he gets pissed off and angry, whenever he grunts and growls when he gets angry, I really enjoy that. So, yeah, Phantom Racer... like his design, think he's fun and enjoyable. Not particularly scary, but one of the more enjoyable and fun villains of the Scooby Doo show. Then we have the motive of the episode, which I found to be great as well. So the main motive for Ken Rogers is that he basically wanted to scare everyone away as a distraction to his main scheme, his real scheme, which was that he wanted to steal all the race cars, repaint them, and sell them overseas, as well as hypnotize the drivers, the race car drivers, to make them forget what happened with that process of him stealing, repainting, and selling the race cars. So this isn't a particularly unique motive. It's been done before. We saw this in the new Scooby Doo movies, and Captain Color's motive is a little bit reminiscent of this as well. Repainting and, stealing, repainting, and selling, vehicles on the market isn't particularly isn't a unique motive in the Scooby Doo franchise. We've seen this before. I think the reason I like it in this episode is, well, the layers to the scheme itself, but also because race cars are a different kind of vehicle. It's not like we're retreading, too similar of a ground. Like, it's not yachts again, or it's not stolen cars again, like the Ghost of the Bigfoot episode. I will say the motive is very similar to the Ghost of Bigfoot episode with Laurel and Hardy, where it very much feels like Mr. Crabtree's motive, with the cars, with the automobile factory of him, I believe he had a similar motive. But I think the difference is that this is a race car, and a race car, is still a different kind of vehicle, so I don't mind it. And because they spread out the motive, as well, and we've had, I think one each time of this motive, we had one in Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? And then one in the new Scooby-Doo movies. And we haven't had the repaint and sell motive in the Scooby Doo show, at least not from what I remember up to this point. So this is actually something, we hadn't seen in a while, and it still has enough flavor to it to where I can give it a pass. So yeah, it's repetitive of a previous motive, and it's not particularly unique, but I've always said in the past that a motive doesn't necessarily have to be unique for it to be good. I know Scooby-Doo's going to run out of motives, and they're going to reuse them. The question is can you put flavor and layers to it to make those repetitive motives good? And I think this is a good example of that, to where, yeah, this is repeating a motive we've seen before, but it's adding layers and flavor to it to where I don't mind, because it has enough flavor and layers to it to make it stand out and on its own, and not make it feel too repetitive and bare bones. From, the Scooby-Doo Where Are You or the new Scooby-Doo movies' version of those motives. So yeah, a great motive. Like I said, not unique, really, but that's not really an issue and not really what I'm looking for. I'm just looking for a good motive, and as long as it's not a bare bones and too repetitive motive, if it has flavor and layers to it, I don't mind them repeating it, as long as it's not too frequent and too bare bones and too repetitive. And they've spread out this motive enough to where I don't mind that they reused it again, because they add enough flavors and layers to it to make it interesting and unique in some way. And my final positive is that I found the mystery of the episode to be good as well. So the main mystery of the episode is you want to know what the Phantom Racer did to these kidnapped race car drivers. And why did he let them live? Because we're not really questioning why he's going after the why the Phantom Racer is going after the race car drivers. Because the backstory Mr. Osborn gives implies why he wants to do it, because he blames them for his death. So I'm not really questioning that. I'm really more so questioning why he's letting these race car drivers live, and what is he doing to them to make them, fall into this state. And we find out at the end that he's hypnotizing them, and that's why they're in the state that they are, and why Carl was in that zombie-like trance state, which, was definitely pretty creepy and scary. It would have probably been easier to kill them, but obviously this is Scooby-Doo, so they're not going to go that far. But yeah, you are questioning why he would let, these race car drivers live. It probably would have been easier, but I guess he didn't really want to he didn't really have that itch or the drive to really do that, and just wanted to deal with his operation and not deal with, murdering people. So yeah, we don't really get the answer of why he let them live, but it's still an interesting question, wondering why Ken Rogers let them live. I suppose it could be a lack of drive or other situations. or he just doesn't have that itch or whatever. But we do get the answer of how, like, why he's putting them in that state. How he gets, these kidnapped race car drivers, what is he doing to them? He's hypnotizing them so they'll forget, and essentially they're in a trance, hypnotized state that's very creepy. That's all I got for positives. So I think it's about time to get on to the negatives of the episode and what brings this episode down for me. So starting with the negatives, my first one is I think Daphne and Velma were weak in this episode. I wasn't particularly happy with how they were utilized. Daphne didn't really do anything. Not anything noteworthy. She wasn't funny or cowardly. She didn't find any clues. She wasn't really much of a leader. She didn't piece together the clues to help solve the mystery. Nothing. Same thing with Velma. Velma didn't really fulfill her basic role of piecing together the clues to help solve the mystery. Fred really did that more so. She did help save Shaggy with Scooby at, towards the end of the episode, but that's really all I can give her, was that she helped save Shaggy at the end. But she didn't really do anything else, so I can't really give her a pass on that, just saving, Shaggy. I'm willing to give that to Scooby because he has more than just that. But Velma, not so much. Like, Velma didn't really fulfill her basic role, and all she really did in this episode was help Scooby save Shaggy. But that was really it. She didn't really do anything really noteworthy in this episode. Outside of costume, I found Ken Rogers to be uninteresting as all hell. I mean, the guy barely made any sort of standout moments or barely made an appearance. If he was there before he faked his own kidnapping, he wasn't noticeable because he barely, made a presence at all and barely did anything. But yeah, the guy, Ken Rogers just was uninteresting. We don't get to know why he's doing this. What is, we don't know much about his backstory. He doesn't really set up the villain. He doesn't really do anything noteworthy. He's a very background character and a very nothing character when we see him. And the only interesting thing he does is fake his own kidnapping, but even that has, like, holes in it and, doesn't really line up well with what we saw and the explanation we get at the end. There were no suspects at all in this episode. We don't have any suspects at all. The Junkyard Watchman is literally just a disguise by Ken Rogers. Like, he isn't even a character, so he doesn't count. Ken Rogers barely makes any sort of appearance or any sort of standout moments to be considered a suspect at all. Carl Conover is portrayed as a victim, and nothing he does, besides that one scene, we don't see him ever again. So he is out as a suspect. And Mr. Osborn is also out as a suspect because we see him present whenever the Phantom Racer is attacking the race car drivers. So he doesn't count either. So none of the men that are presented can be counted as suspects because they either didn't have enough screen time, there was a double disguise, or they were portrayed as a victim, or they were ruled out because they couldn't be at two places at once. So while you could argue some of these men, I don't consider any of them suspects. Ken Rogers and his alter ego, the Junkyard Night Watchman, don't count. Carl Conover doesn't count, and Mr. Osborn doesn't count either. So you end up with no suspects in this episode. Nobody really point the finger to. And yeah, it just kind of sucks. We needed a better suspect pool. Like, it was there. We had potential, but they didn't really execute it well because of a variety of factors. Because they either, Ken Rogers didn't really have much of a screen presence. And his alter ego, like I said, doesn't really count. He doesn't really, it's just an alter ego. It's fake. And Carl Conover is portrayed as a victim. There's no implication that we're supposed to believe that he could be a potential suspect. And Mr. Osborn is not portrayed as a suspect either. He's actually portrayed as a helpful character and needs to get gang's help, or otherwise, he's going to be, bad things are going to happen for him because he needs this race to succeed. He needs it, he would be doomed without it. The episode implies as much, so it makes no sense why he would do that. And he also is shown to be present while the Phantom Racer is attacking the other race car drivers, so he can't really count as a suspect. So yeah, no suspects in this episode. They really needed to get at least two suspects at the very least to help make it, a 50-50 chance, but Yeah, we had nobody to point the finger to. So honestly, when they revealed Ken Rogers at the end, I was like, oh, that guy, the guy that got kidnapped early on. Yeah, that's how little of an impression he made when he was on screen. So yeah, very poor in the suspect department. Definitely needed way more suspects. Don't know why there was no suspects in this episode, but they needed way more in this episode. At least 2 to help give us a decent suspect pool. I found the clues of the episode to be very poorly executed. So the main clues of the episode was the jet plane engine and the 2 books, one on magic tricks and the other on how to hypnotize. So these all explain how, Ken Rogers was able to achieve the effects he did as the Phantom Racer. The jet, plane engine explains how he was able to be as fast as he was and capture these other race car drivers. The magic tricks probably, I assume, explain how he was able to, explain the magnet and how he's able to capture the drivers and their cars, and, how he was able to make them disappear. And the how to hypnotize explains, how the race car drivers were in the state that they were, and how they were able to not remember what happened to them. So they explain the gimmicks of the villain, but they don't narrow down any of the suspects, mainly because there is none. But they also don't point towards a motive. They don't point towards a motive at all. So yeah, the clues, while good at explaining the gimmicks, they definitely needed clues to either narrow down the suspect pool, or they needed clues to point towards a motive, and they had neither of that. So while it's cool to have the gimmicks explained, they definitely needed more to, it's definitely more important for clues to either narrow down the suspect list or to point towards a motive. I found the atmosphere to also be poorly executed as well. I felt no tension or suspense or creepiness or eeriness. I wasn't fearing for the gang's safety. I wasn't on the edge of my seat wondering what was going to happen next. And nothing the villain did besides maybe like the one scene with Carl being in that zombie-like trance state, after he was hypnotized, and the dark, foggy night surrounding it. I feel like those were the only aspects where there was some kind of atmosphere, but I don't think they fully took advantage of it. Like, there was potential. It was a dark, foggy night for most of the episode, and you had the creepy scene of Carl coming in all, like, zombie-like and trance-like, which was a good start to the atmosphere of the episode. But then it never really reaches those heights again, and it just ends up being pretty bland in all honesty. Like, the setting doesn't really help it, and nothing the villain does really helps it at all either. So yeah, while there's potential and little crumbs of atmosphere in the beginning, they don't fully execute it well, and it ends up being a very poorly executed atmosphere. There was a little bit there at the beginning, but they didn't quite, build upon it and, keep it throughout the episode, which is a shame because there was potential there, but they just couldn't capture it. And my final negative is that I found the setting of the episode to be weak. So the main setting of the episode is the junkyard. There's also the Grand Prix time trials racetrack, which I found to be very, bland. But the junkyard felt very bland and repetitive. Now, I did like the antique car museum. I did think that was a cool setting. That was something new we hadn't seen before. And I kind of wish that had been the setting, because that was a really cool setting. That could have been an interesting setting for an episode. But they only go there for like a short period, and it honestly felt like, a setting that belonged in a different episode. It kind of didn't really belong in this. And probably it's because, they were only pointed, directed towards there just because Ken Rogers wanted them off the trail and off the scent, and to distract them and get rid of them so that he could continue on with his business. But the junkyard's the main setting, and the junkyard's nothing new. We've seen a junkyard before. It was in the Ghost of Bigfoot episode in the new Scooby Doo movies with Laurel and Hardy. That was literally the same kind of setting. A lot of repetitive use of those elements in that new Scooby Doo movies episode. This feels very reminiscent of the Laurel and Hardy episode. So, while I did like the antique car museum as a setting, and I think that could have been a neat setting for an episode, the junkyard and the Grand Prix time trials, track, those both, one feels like, the track with the Grand Prix time trials feels boring because we don't really get a good look at the full track. And the junkyard itself is just bland and repetitive. We've seen this before. There's not really much interesting about it. It's a very boring setting in my eyes. I definitely would have liked the antique car museum to be the main setting of the episode. And it felt like it belonged in a different episode because it didn't really match with what was going on in the episode. But I still did like it as a setting. I wish it had been the main setting, but as it stands, it's not. And, the main setting we got with the junkyard just wasn't really a great setting. Very repetitive. We've seen this before in the Laurel and Hardy episode, and it's very bland too. It has nothing, that stands out in it. It's a very boring type of setting. Overall, guys, despite the negatives that I have for this episode, I would still recommend this episode to fans and newcomers of the show. It's a flawed episode, to be sure. It has a lot of issues and a lot of negatives, but it's such a fun and enjoyable episode that I really don't give a shit, honestly. If I'm in the right mood, like in the Josie and the Pussycats episode, if I'm in the right mood for it, I can pop it in and just have a fun time with it. I can enjoy it, despite the flaws and negatives it has. So, it's not going to blow your socks off. It's not, the perfect representation of a Scooby Doo episode or mystery. But if you're looking for a more laid-back, fun episode, I feel like the Josie and the Pussycats episode, this is that kind of episode where if you want to have fun and enjoy yourself and you're not really, looking for, you're not really, looking for a hardcore, mystery and you want an episode that you can lay back to and just have a fun time with, I think this is a good episode to put on, like the Josie and the Pussycats episode. It has a lot of flaws, a lot of issues, but it's still so fun and enjoyable that I feel like you can have a good time with it. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the review. Please give it a like if you did. Comment down below your thoughts on the episode. Do you like this episode? Do you think I'm being a little, negative towards it? Do you think there are more positives in it that you see that I don't see? Do you hate this episode? I'd be interested in that as well. Are you not big on this episode? Do you think it's terrible? Do you think I'm a little too lenient on this episode? Or are you somewhere in the middle like me where you think it's a decent and fun and enjoyable but flawed episode, but it's not good or bad? I'm curious for your thoughts, so let me know. And subscribe for more Scooby Doo content like this, or if you're just interested in any of my other content, obviously I have more Scooby Doo reviews on the way. I cover all things Scooby Doo TV show episode reviews, Scooby Doo movie reviews, Scooby Doo Let's Plays and video game reviews, Scooby Doo book reviews, you name it. We do all things Scooby on this channel. We love talking all things Scooby on this channel. We don't, we don't discriminate against any Scooby media. We give every piece of Scooby Doo media a spotlight and, give it the chance to, have discussion and give it, the chance to have some love and the attention that it deserves. So, if you're like me and want to talk all things Scooby-Doo and not just the stuff that's popular and always talked about, and want the more obscure stuff or the stuff that's mildly talked about but not as much, and even some of the popular stuff, and bring a new fresh opinion to the table, come join the channel, experience some amazing Scooby-Doo content. Let's talk all things Scooby-Doo. In my next video, I'll continue my reviews of the Scooby Doo Show with a review Season 2, Episode 6 of the Scooby Doo Show, titled The Ozark Witch Switch. I haven't watched this episode in a while, so I don't have high expectations going into this episode. I don't remember how good it is, so we'll see if it's an enjoyable or even good episode, but I haven't watched it in a while, so we'll see how, how I receive it. It isn't really talked about that much, so I don't know what to expect for this episode. Maybe it'll be a hidden gem. Maybe it'll be be forgotten for a reason because it's either average or bad. But if you're interested in my thoughts on Season 2, Episode 6 of the Scooby Doo Show, the Ozark Witch Switch, then come join me next time. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching this video, and as always, peace out.